Let's have a look at this conversation from the Working Group podcast last night. I talked a bit about this yesterday because I was listening to it as I was prepping for last night's show. And this is Bomber, Martyn Bradbury. This is Chewy's hero and idol from Channel Z days. Is that right, Chewy?
Yep, he was the one that made me want to get into broadcasting.
And Shane Te Pou is on the show with him. Shane Te Pou is a former candidate, campaign manager and executive member of New Zealand Labour, of the Labour Party, I should say. Willie Jackson's on with him as well. And Willie Jackson is currently the Minister for Broadcasting and the Minister for Māori Development. They're on the show with him. And I'm going to play two clips. The first one's a bit longer. And they were talking about, because we talked about it yesterday, or maybe the day before, the National Party conference and what they saw around that. And within that, of course, they have a bit of a crack at the conversation around how National doesn't know their numbers and more. So here's Shane Te Pou, Willie Jackson and Bomber talking about the National Party conference from the Working Group podcast from last night.
We have to move on, comrades, to issue 2. The National Party conference was held over the weekend, where Chris Luxon launched a whole range of knee-jerk law and order policies that were ill thought out and pretty stupid. I wrote that within a week, National would have walked back all this nonsense once journalists started asking actual questions of the policy to strip judges of discretion, impose harsher sentences, and somehow force prisoners on remand to complete rehabilitation programs. Hilariously, Chris was walking things back within 24 hours. Shane, National claim the soft-on-crime cuddle-a-crim Labour Party are fecklessly letting out 4,000 prisoners while the crime rate soars. What they don't understand is Labour lowered the prison population using National Party prison policy that allowed for non-violent offenders to apply for home detention while in prison. The only difference between National's use of their policy and Labour's is that Labour provided prisoners with help filling out the forms because most prisoners were illiterate. If National don't understand the current prison policy, how can they provide solutions?
And the other thing that Labour did do is that they set up and funded organisations like Grace in South Auckland, so people could go and have somewhere to live, and that's why bail often wasn't given.
Right.
And let's remember, folks, you know, we talk about the rule of law. Remand prisoners have not been found guilty.
Exactly.
Have not been found guilty. And the other thing is this. When you get the fundamental costings wrong, live on air, that your justice spokesperson, your police spokesperson, your Prime Minister can't get right by a factor of almost 2.
Right.
You know, not $10,000 out per prisoner, but $90,000 out per prisoner. It just looked farcical.
Oh.
And you know what? Here's the thing about conferences and conventions is it's stage managed, and you can absolutely get it right because it's your agenda. And they weren't even able to do that.
It's a beautiful point. They're stage managed so you can get it right, and they didn't get it right. Today's episode is brought to you by bhnshop.nz. Yep, that's right. Big Hairy News has merch that enables you to both support what we do and allows you to voice your political opinions via the international medium of clothing. Head to bhnshop.nz for this month's drop of either If the Left Vote, the Left Wins, or Christopher Luxon, not a businessman, just a board member, with free delivery in New Zealand. This month's drop ends July 20th, so be quick and head to bhnshop.nz to make your order and support what we're doing to fight mis- and disinformation this election cycle. That's bhnshop.nz.
Willie, we had this surreal situation over the weekend where journalists bombarded National for costing of this mass incarceration policy, and they had no numbers. Asked what the cost of a New Zealander in prison per annum was, Paul Goldsmith and Chris Luxon said $100,000, when the actual cost, as Shane pointed out, is $193,000. How can a party pushing extreme uncosted policy like this pretend to be a government in waiting?
Well, and more importantly, as we've said as well, maybe not more importantly, be in charge of the accounts. You know, Chewy, if you don't know how much your mortgage is, or your power, or your anything, you can't put a number on it. I wouldn't be the person to put you in charge of your finances in your house just quietly.
Well, you notice our Justice Minister said that straight away, didn't she? You know, Kitty Tapu Allen came out and challenged them in terms of their costings, and it just shows you their strategy is knee-jerk stuff, right? doing the what everybody's look, you know, we know our communities. We have to look after our communities. But what appeals? I will take discretion away from judges. Cut it out.
Well,
You can't take discretion away from judges.
Right.
You gotta fund this stuff. We've been around a long time. We're doing the best we can. I like what our justice minister's doing. You know, they make out they'd make huge changes. They didn't make bugger all changes when they were in there. You remember when Simon Power was in Shane?
Yeah.
He was holding gang conferences in Parliament here. I came to some of them. So it's just not, you know, Chester Burrows and them were some of the most liberal guys you'd ever come across.
Right.
You know?
and also there's a false premise to all of this, and that is prisons don't rehabilitate.
Oh,
No.
Prisons criminalise. And
Right.
look, we're not. Willie and I are not big left sort of softies. We know for a number of people who transgress that prison is the only place for them.
Right. Agreed.
We know
Agreed.
that.
Agreed.
We know that.
Right.
But we also know, just in terms of our own whānau and our own community contact, the worst thing can happen to people, particularly young people, is do time inside.
Absolutely.
You know, I'm
100%.
57, and I remember when Borstals were in, and I saw good kids get sent away for 6 weeks for stealing a bike. You know what, mate?
Yeah.
I'm 57 years of age. Many of those people have done 30, 40 years in jail off and on. Once you are institutionalised in jails,
It's over, eh?
It's over.
Right.
Only very few come out of it better off.
It's
That's
incredibly
just the reality.
counterproductive. 70% re-offence rate in 2 years. How can you say that's a system that's working?
Chewy, yours, sir. Well, I've got one more clip. It's only 30 seconds, but it's about
Oh
something
my God, love this chat. Like
Yeah.
100%. Like I see comments on Twitter more and more when National are bringing out new policy, and it's basic unforced errors like not knowing how much it's going to cost. They don't seem to be a serious party. You know, it's like, why have you not got your shit together? You knew that this was going to be a big election. You went into it thinking, yep, there's enough disharmony and unhappiness with what Labor have done. We should be able to have this in the bag. It's kind of like they're doing the victory of that before it's even started. That they don't have to try.
Yeah.
And it's become that much of a meme that Luxon's going to say something on the weekend and have to walk it back by Tuesday, that we're not the only people saying it.
But interesting, Simon, here. This is a little side note. The working group is different with Damien Grant's stuff around. It was much more enjoyable to watch yesterday. Without I was having to talk about the various things in the it comes back also to those ideas about what are the policies and what are the ideas and what are those inspirational things that we want to follow, and National doesn't have them. They never have, they never will. They reiterate, as you said last night, looking over their shoulder, and just remember, people, and if Chewy had the shirt on now, he'd probably rip it open. If the left vote, the left wins. We're going to say that time and time again, and as Chewy said last night really clearly, but what's happening with the right and what they're trying to sow, the seeds they're sowing at the moment, is actually working, which is why it's so close. So it's working for the right, it's working for National, what they're trying to put out there, but we're going to come back to that time and time again. If the left vote, the left wins, and it's going to be fucking close. And I said it last night, I'll say it again. I would say at the moment, if you were to place a wager, you'd probably put National in the driver's seat very slightly to win this election. Doesn't mean they're going to win it. I always say to my partner when we're talking about odds, sometimes the 1% poker hand still wins the hand at the end. And this is like a 49-51% hand, but I would say the bookies at the moment would probably have National Act winning very, very slightly. However, if the left vote, the left wins, and hopefully tomorrow night, if I finally figure out my Shopify site, you will be able to have a look at the t-shirts yourself that say, if the left vote, the left wins, and start to tell other people about it, because that's the reality. Every Western country in the world, I'm confident in saying this, the citizens are far more left than right, but the left is the group that do not participate, and because they do not participate, it's a 50-50 match most elections. If the left participate and the left vote, the left wins. Chewy.
I also want to make a comment about prisons, right? Because
Yep.
these guys have talked a little bit about it. Prisons are, I think, a necessary evil, but I think they should be the last step in a process. Because if you make it an early step, if you, like they're talking about kids, I think if you get kids into that funnel, it's a pipeline. It's part of a cycle that we need to break. You look back at all of these things that we're talking about now, broken families and gangs and all of that sort of stuff. It started with punitive, custodial organizations. The mongrel mob came out of the Borstals and the group
Yeah.
home.
Yeah.
And we can't keep forgetting that lesson and then 20 years down the track going, God, where are these feral families coming from? It's coming from broken people taken away from their families at the drop of a hat. Like, I get people's drive to have this really punitive, there's got to be consequences sort of thing. There's got to be a door slamming on these people. Consequences can be bringing people in front of the people that they've hurt or the communities that they've damaged and making them feel it. Turn them away. You turn them into that path if you lock them away. They might be off the streets for a couple of years, but they'll be back and they'll be harder and tougher. That's what you get on the right wing. That's what they want.
And the way you solve that, Chewy, is 3 strikes and you throw them in jail for a lot longer, according to the National Party.
You just weaponize it. And we'll just take these policies from other countries where it's failed. Why anyone looks at the States for law and order ideas can get in the fucking sea. Like, there isn't a success story about law and order in America.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, you've brought up gangs and you've mentioned gangs. So let me play this last clip. It's only like 40-ish seconds because Shane Te Pou was talking about the spike in gangs and had some really salient words to say about it. So let's have a listen to those last 40 seconds.
We've seen a spike in gang numbers. We recognise that over the last 2 or 3 years. But you know when I first saw gang numbers explode? Rogernomics.
501.
Rogernomics.
Yeah.
Euthanasia.
Right.
Generational unemployment, a lack of belonging, a lack of jobs. So what they do is they join gangs. Look, I'm from Kawerau. We've always had a gang presence, mate, but in the 1980s it exploded. Yeah. And now we have 2, 3 coming into the 4th generation. So let's look at economic policy before we look at deep poverty and generational poverty, which breeds generational trauma, before we look at knee-jerk reactions.
Shane.
There you go. That was the last little clip I wanted to play. You brought up gangs that seemed to fit so well right there, Chewy.
Yeah. You look at all of the organizations that deal with families involved with gangs. They know how to solve this. They've been screaming it from the rooftops what needs to happen. And every time someone starts to listen to them and starts to make progress, like, oh, maybe we need wraparound social programs and care. We need to make sure that the kids are fed and they go to school and that sort of thing. And they talk to the women because that's the key. Yeah. You won't get anything about these tough, broken men, but you get their wives and partners. That's where you make progress. It might not be fast progress, but that's where you make progress with the women and the kids. And you help them find a better life than what they've got. Because I think all of them in their hearts would say that this is not a good life, but it's the life that they've made, and they've found some sort of family, some sort of belonging.
And on some level being dealt. Like when you're talking about intergeneration, we talked about this last night about it's very easy to accept that you have a financial positive benefit from your forebears being wealthy, but for some reason we want to go, oh, there can be no negative consequences carrying through the generations. Of course there can, be it poverty, be it crime, be it gang, whatever. Things carry through generations. And as soon as you can admit and be honest and say that your great-grandfather's wealth can be positively impacting you today, then you must also admit that your great-grandfather's poverty or negative attributions because of where they are and how they're lived and the society they're in could also still be impacting you today. Until we get there and have an honest conversation, there's no one's going to solve this problem or these problems.
What I want, Nash, like... Why would you return to society when you see so many people describing you as ferals, describing you as the problem? I tell you what the response is: if society doesn't want you, I don't want society. Fuck you all. I'll do what I want. But you leave the light on for them. They'll come back. You got to show people a better way. You can't force them. Like, and it comes out every election. Every election, they keep unlearning the same lessons. And people like it, right? Like people love punishment. But the party of outcomes doesn't look at the outcomes when they come up with policy. They don't look at the numbers. They look at, like, you can turn around and go, okay, if we're going to massively expand the prison system, it costs almost $200,000 to keep someone locked up for a year, and we're going to expand that to kids in boot camps, even though that's never, ever, ever been proven to work anywhere that it's tried. Like that blanket, we've tried it here, it didn't work. We'll try it again. You're going to expand those policies. It's a hugely expensive, ineffective program. It does not work. And they're campaigning on it. It's a house of cards. You poke it, it falls apart.
And still not costing that either, the boot camps.
And they still don't know how much it costs.
Yeah.
Insane.